a silver and a black." Breault grunted. "You must have met Cassidy, then," he said casually, without looking at McKay. "Corporal Terence Cassidy. This is his country." Jolly Roger did not look up from his work of digging. "Yes, I know him. Met him last winter. Red-headed. A nice chap. I like him. You know him?" "Entered the service together," said Breault. "But he's unlucky. For 2 or 3 years he has been on the trail of a man named McKay. Jolly Roger, they call him. Jolly Roger McKay. Ever hear of him?" Jolly Roger nodded. "Cassidy told me about him when he was at my cabin. From what I've heard, I rather like him." "Who? Cassidy or Jolly Roger?" "Both." For the first time the ferret leveled his eyes at his companion. They were mystifying eyes, never appearing to open fully, but remaining half closed, as if to conceal whatever thought might lie behind them. McKay felt their penetration. It was like a cold chill entering into him, warning him of a menace deadlier than the storm. "Haven't any idea where one might come upon this Jolly Roger, have you?" "No." "You see, he thinks he killed a man down south. Well, he didn't. The man lived. If you happen to see him at any time, give him that information, will you?" Jolly Roger thrust his head and shoulders into the growing tunnel. "Yes, I will." He knew Breault was lying, and also knew that back of the narrow slits of Breault's eyes was the cunning of a fox. "You might also tell him the law has a mind to forgive him for sticking up that Free Trader's post a few years ago." Jolly Roger turned with his snowshoe piled high with a load of snow. "I'll tell him that, too," he said, chuckling at the obviousness of the other's trap. "What do you think my cabin is, Breault? A rest for homeless outlaws?" Breault grinned. It was an odd sort of grin, and Jolly Roger caught it over his shoulder. When he returned from dumping his load, Breault said, "You see, we know this Jolly Roger fellow is spending the winter somewhere up here, and Cassidy says there's a girl down south—" Jolly Roger's face was hidden in the tunnel. "Who would like to see him," finished Breault. When McKay turned toward him, the ferret was carelessly lighting his pipe. "I remember. Cassidy told me about this girl," said Jolly Roger. "He said, some day, he would trap this man through the girl. So if I happen to meet Jolly Roger McKay and send him back to the girl, it'll help out the law. Is that it, Breault? And is there any reward tacked to it? Anything in it for me?" Breault was looking at him in the pale light of the alcohol lamp, puffing out tobacco smoke, and with that odd twist of a smile about his thin lips. "Listen to the storm," he said. "I think it's getting worse. Cummings." Suddenly he held out a hand to Peter, who sat near the lamp, his bright eyes fixed watchfully on the stranger. "Nice dog you have, Cummings. Come here, Peter. Peter! Peter!" Tight ringers seemed to grip at McKay's throat. He had not spoken Peter's name since the rescue of Breault. "Peter! Peter!" The ferret was smiling affably. But Peter did not move. He made no response to the outstretched hand. His eyes were steady and challenging. In that moment McKay wanted to hug him up in his arms. The ferret laughed. "He's a good dog. A very good dog, Cummings. I like a one-man dog, and I also like a one-dog man. That's what Jolly Roger McKay is, if you ever happen to meet him. Travels with one dog. An Airedale, with whiskers on him like a Mormon. And his name is Peter. Funny name for a dog, isn't it?" He faced the outer room, stretching his long arms over his head. I'm going to try sleep again, Cummings. Good night, and Mother of Heaven, listen to the wind!" "Yes, it's a bad night," said McKay. He looked at Peter when Breault was gone, and his heart was beating fast. He could hear the wind, too. It was sweeping over the Barren more fiercely than before, and the sound of it brought a steely glitter into his eyes. This time he could not run away from the law. Flight meant death. And Breault knew it. He was in a trap built by himself. That is, if Breault had guessed the truth, and he believed he had. There was only one way out, and that meant fight. He went into the outer room for his pack and a blanket. He did not look at Breault, but he knew the man's narrow eyes were following him. He left the alcohol lamp burning, but in his own room, after he had spread out his bed, he extinguished the light. Then, very quietly, he dug a hole through the snow partition between the two rooms. He waited for 10 minutes before he thrust a fingertip through the last thin crust of snow. With his eye close to the aperture he could see Breault. The ferret was sitting up and leaning toward Porter, who was sleeping an arm's length away. He reached over and touched him on the shoulder. Jolly Roger widened the snow slit another inch, straining his ears to hear. He could see Tavish and the girl asleep. In another moment Porter was sitting up, with the ferret's hand gripping his arm warningly. Breault motioned toward the inner room, and Porter was silent. Then Breault bent over and began to whisper. Jolly Roger could hear only the indistinct monotone of his voice, but he could see very clearly the change that came into Porter's face. His eyes widened and he stared toward the inner room, making a movement as if to rouse Tavish and the girl. The ferret stopped him. "Don't get excited. Let them sleep." McKay heard that much, and no more. For some time after that the two men sat close together, conversing in whispers. There was an exultant satisfaction in Porter's clean-cut face, as well as in Breault's. Jolly Roger watched them until Breault extinguished the second lamp. Then he lightly plugged the hole in the partition with snow, and reached out in the darkness until his hand found Peter. "They think they've got us, boy," he whispered. "They think they've got us." Very quietly they lay for an hour. McKay did not sleep, and Peter was wide awake. At the end of that hour Jolly Roger crept on his hands and knees to the doorway and listened. One after another he picked out the steady breathing of the sleepers. Then he began feeling his way around the wall of his room until he came to a place where the snow was very soft. "An air drift," he whispered to Peter, close at his shoulder. "We'll fool 'em, boy, and we'll fight if we have to." He began worming his head and shoulders and body into the air drift like a gimlet. A foot at a time he burrowed himself through, heaving his body up and down and sideways to pack the light snow, leaving a round tunnel 2 feet in diameter behind him. Within an hour he had come to the outer crust on the windward side of the big snow dune. He did not break through this crust, which was as tough as crystal glass, but lay quietly for a time and listened to the sweep of the wind outside. It was warm and very comfortable, and he had half dozed off before he caught himself back into wakefulness and returned to his room. The mouth of his tunnel he packed with snow. After that he wound the blanket about him and gave himself up calmly to sleep. Only Peter lay awake after that. And it was Peter who roused Jolly Roger in what would have been the early dawn outside the snow dune. McKay felt his restless movement and opened his eyes. A faint light was illuminating his room, and he sat up. In the other room the alcohol lamp was burning again. He could hear movement and voices that were very low and indistinct. Carefully he dug out once more the little hole in the snow wall,